I'm a park ranger. I found something in Yosemite that can't be explained. The rocky, dirty road crunched beneath the truck's tires as I drove through the dense forest, careful of the branches which overhung the path and scraped the windows. My eyes were darting around constantly, keeping an eye out for wildlife and fallen trees. This far into Yosemite, there weren't many people. As a park ranger, it's my job to patrol these woods and protect any visitors from nature as much as possible. Not to mention protecting nature from the visitors. Especially this time of year when unlicensed hunters are out, and clueless campers and amateur hikers are roaming alongside them. It's often a lethal combination. Just as I was thinking about these amateur hikers, I saw a woman standing a little ways off the road. She was in a rock-strewn field on a slope leading up to a hill to my left. Despite the fact that we were out in the middle of nowhere, she had no hiking equipment, no backpack, nothing. As I got a little closer, she saw me, but began to walk away, marching up the rocky slope. This far out in the middle of nowhere, I expected a wave or a hello at the very least. Most of the time, if you're out here on your own, on foot, you don't see anyone for days at a time. "Hey miss, are you okay?" I yelled, worrying she was suffering from exposure. Sometimes people get lost out in these woods, and by the time you reach them, they're nearly catatonic. I'd seen it before, men and women with 1,000 yards there. She didn't respond though, instead continuing up the slope until she'd reached the top, then she disappeared into the tree line. The woman's face looked kind of familiar, I realised, and I pulled up a file on my laptop. It showed people had been reported missing in this area. It took me a minute, but eventually I found the woman's file. There were photos that matched the person I had just seen exactly, except their clothes were different, and the woman had been reported missing for 8 months prior. She looked considerably worse, I thought, especially considering her lack of supplies. These woods were harsh, brutal wilderness. I quickly called into the station and told them what I'd just seen. Then I grabbed my backpack and took off on foot, running up the rocky slope towards the trees. If she continued at the pace she'd been moving, I had a good chance of catching up with her. At the top of the hill I managed to find her tracks. I followed her into the woods, tracing a path through the trees. For almost an hour I followed her through the path to the forest, becoming more and more convinced that I should have caught up with her. I realised something was wrong. I'd lost the trail. It was like the woman had vanished. I kept moving forward, thinking maybe I would pick up on her tracks again. This happened sometimes. I knew as an amateur hunter. The quarry's path would disappear occasionally, only to reappear a little ways away, so I kept going, pushing aside branches and shrubbery, and moving ever deeper into the overgrown wilderness. And that's when I saw it. "What the hell is that?" I muttered to myself, not believing my own eyes as the object came into focus up ahead. It was a staircase that appeared out the overgrowth, looking otherworldly in this environment. "What's this doing out here?" I realised I was talking to myself, but I couldn't help it. I also couldn't seem to help the fact that I was steadily moving towards the staircase in the forest, despite the growing feeling which told me I should stay away. The closer I got to the staircase, the more I felt as if someone was watching me. The hairs stood up on the back of my neck and goosebumps rose on my arms as I approached, moving closer and closer until I was standing right in front of it. Strangely enough, the stairs looked relatively new. They appeared unassuming and normal in every way, except for their odd location. The wood was not weather-worn or moss-coated. It was clean, and I would have guessed it had been built in the last 10-20 years. But the staircase ended after exactly 13 steps. It was a staircase leading to nowhere. It was an eerie sight out here, since I was well aware of how difficult it would be to construct them in the middle of nowhere. What was the purpose of them? Who built them? And why? Even as I was asking myself these questions, I found myself walking up the stairs. It was like I was in a dream. My feet seemed to move, involuntarily upwards, but the feeling of eyes on the back of my neck grew worse and worse with each step, and I could feel the weight of someone else's movement on the stairs with me. I was sure of it. Eventually the paranoia became so overpowering that I had to turn around, feeling as if someone or something was definitely right behind me on the stairs. But when I turned round, there was nothing there. Suddenly I felt terrified as hell, and started wondering what I'd been thinking about climbing those stairs in the woods that I shouldn't have been there. I started going back down, feeling eyes watching me from all around. The trees nearby rustled with movement and I saw a vague shape moving behind them. Hurrying the remainder of the way down the steps, I called out to the figure, thinking it had to be the woman I saw earlier. "Miss, is that you? I've been looking all over for you. Are you alright?" I asked the figure in the shadows, but it didn't move or respond. Instead, it just continued to watch. "Okay, lady, I can't help you if you don't." Suddenly, it occurred to me that the figure in the shadows was too tall to be the woman I'd seen earlier. It looked to be a person, at least 6.5 feet tall, maybe more, and they were ducking behind the tree, to not be seen so clearly. The thing stood up even taller, and I realised they had been crouched down. It was enormous. its form impossible to examine in the low light, but it was definitely watching me. And there were more of them. I realised, my heart pounding faster and harder until it felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. I span around, looking at the forest all around me, seeing these shadow shapes everywhere. For a few long moments I was frozen, unable to move or think. Then I saw a long-fingered hand pushing back the foliage, preparing to emerge. That woke me up from my trance. Whatever these things were, I could tell they weren't benevolent or good. They were creatures of darkness, luring people to them so they could feast on their minds. I tore my gaze away from it and began to run. Racing through the trees, I could sense them following after me, a platoon of lanky, impossibly tall creatures with long fingers. Were they the ones who had created the staircase out here? Were they aliens? Sasquatches? I had no idea, but every time I looked back over my shoulder I saw them gaining on me. Vague shapes moving so quickly they blurred and they were tough to make out. That was when I realised that it was getting dark outside. But it didn't make sense, since when I'd set out it had been the morning hours, around 8 AM. Checking my watch, I saw it was no longer functioning, nor were my cell phone or GPS devices working. With no other choice but to keep running, that's what I did, bolting through the forest until eventually I found the rocky slope beside the dirt road where I'd left my truck. I ran right over the edge of the cliff, so terrified and frantic that I didn't see it coming. These things were just behind me by that point, and I was almost ready to resign myself to dying trying to fight them. Instead, I went tumbling down the rock-strewn hillside, somersaulting and hitting my elbows, knees, shoulders and skull off the boulders and stones. A mini avalanche ensured that I went down hard, face-planting as my feet were unable to keep up with my momentum. A sharp pain struck my forehead and I tasted blood in my mouth. My vision went dark and I laid on a pile of rubble and went to sleep. When I woke up, there was a park ranger standing over me, asking if I was okay. The weird thing was, I didn't recognise him. "You look kind of familiar," he said, furrowing his brow. "What's your name?" I told him, and his jaw dropped, his face turning a shade pale. "It can't be. Everybody thought you were dead." Looking around, I saw my truck was nowhere to be seen. It was a different season as well. The trees were turning slightly yellow when I had gone into the forest, an early signal of autumn, but now they were bright green as if they were just beginning summer. "What's the date today?" I asked him. He told me, but I didn't believe him at first. "You're making it up," I said, shaking my head. "I just went into the woods for a couple of hours to find that woman. That's when I remembered her again." "Did anybody find her, or is she still missing?" "Nobody's seen any woman, just like nobody's seen you, for 8 months. His eyes were suspicious and I realised he thought I was losing my mind, or I'd just lost it out in the forest. I shook my head and I looked back into the woods. "We need to get a search party out there." "Didn't you hear me? If you saw a woman when you went out there, she's long gone by now." My eyes stayed firmly fixed on the trees in the distance. "Not for her. There's something else out there." I couldn't resist the pull of it and started wandering back up to the rocky slope. It felt like I was in an iron filing, and that staircase was a strong magnet, drawing me towards it. "We all need to go to it." The other ranger grabbed my arm and pulled me back, restraining me, yelling at me to calm down. It took 5 more men to get me to stop, and to get me into the hospital. They keep telling me what I saw wasn't real, that I was suffering from exposure, that I'd got lost in the forest and hit my head, suffering a concussion. The doctors say I hallucinated all of it, but I know what I saw, and as soon as I get out of this hospital, I'm going back. Lucknow, India, 16th of December 2011, 5 PM. A cold evening. I had to attend a dinner party around 50 kilometres away from the hotel I was staying in. I called the cab company and booked a pickup at 7 PM. About 20 minutes later, I got a text message on my mobile with the driver's name, Abdul Hassan, and the car registration number. I took a shower and got dressed up. Exactly at 7 PM, I got a call from the driver. Punctual, I thought. I went downstairs and greeted Abdul Hassan, a man in his late 50s. He was wearing traditional Indian dress, a white kurta and a pyjama. He was sporting a grey beard. Abdul told me that the drive would take a little longer than usual, maybe around an hour and a half because of the foggy weather. That didn't bother me because I had to reach the party only by 9 PM. I checked Abdul's ID and the car number and jumped into the front seat. 10 minutes into the journey, I noticed that Abdul had not switched on the meter. "Mate, you've not switched on the meter yet. How are you going to charge me?" I asked. "Never mind, sir. This trip is free for you," Abdul responded with a smile. "What?" I said with a puzzled look. "Sir, today is my last day in this job. I'm retiring tomorrow, and will go into pilgrimage after that. This is my last assignment, and you are my last passenger. I I cannot take money from you, Abdul clarified. No, Abdul, I can't accept that. You give me service, and I pay for the service. We only met 10 minutes back. I can't take any favours from you for no reason, I shot back. Sir, I always thought that my last assignment would be free. 200 rupees won't really make a difference to either of us now, will it? Please allow this poor Indian man to feel good on his last day at work, said Abdul. I couldn't argue any further. I just smiled and thought that simple good things have still not vanished from this world entirely, and sometimes it's these poor people who remind us that these good things still exist. I started chatting with Abdul. He had been driving for 35 years. Never once have I missed a pickup, sir. Never once have I not been on time, Abdul claimed proudly. I could not disbelieve him. He had already won my heart, but then I noticed his watch. An old, worn-out watch which was not working and still showing the time as 6:45 p.m. I found it amusing that a man who had a dead watch was claiming to be so punctual. Your watch is dead, Abdul, I said a bit sarcastically. Oh, my father gave this watch to me. It doesn't work, but it's my lucky charm, so I wear it all the time. But I don't really need a watch to be on time, Abdul said with a smile. We both laughed, and indeed Abdul was on time, at least in my case, despite the dead watch. We continued to talk about various other things, his family, my family, the city, and many more. 90 minutes spent with a good man, and we reached my destination, sharp at 8:30 p.m. I got down from the car and said to Abdul, You're a good man, Abdul. I know you won't take money from me, but just as a memory of this drive, I insist you take this watch of mine. Don't say no. I took my watch off and gave it to Abdul. Abdul resisted initially, but accepted my gift finally. I thanked Abdul and we said goodbye to each other. Abdul left and I walked into the dinner party. About 5 minutes later, my phone rang. I picked it up. Sir, I'm calling from the cab company. Sir, we're so sorry that your pickup hasn't happened yet. We will arrange for another cab immediately, a lady's voice said from the other side of the phone. What do you mean? I was picked up by your driver, sharp on time. In fact, I've reached my destination now, I replied. Who picked you up, sir? The lady asked after a pause. Abdul Hassan, the driver who was supposed to pick me up. I checked his ID and the car registration number before boarding, I said. Sir, you must be confused. Somebody else should have picked you up. Abdul Hassan died in a road accident at around 6:45 today, 15 minutes before your pickup time. He was on the way to pick you up when he had the accident. We have been informed about his death just now, the lady said. I froze. I understood why Abdul didn't take any money from me, because he didn't need money. Why his watch was dead, because the time stopped at 6:45. Yet, he did his duty one last time, and he was on time, as he claimed, even on his last assignment. I started sweating, even in December cold. I looked at my wrist. My watch was there. Abdul didn't need my watch either. Uncanny. We have an intimate understanding of when something feels wrong. In the context of film, CGI is inherently easy to spot. Unnatural body movements, sequences of facial expressions that shouldn't follow each other. Reactions that are too fast or slow. It's not always easy to put a finger on it, but we can universally comprehend that what we're seeing isn't human. Taking a step back and looking at this phenomena, and its prevalence across every established ethnic group and culture, begs a question. Why did we as a species become so adept at noticing things that looked like us, but weren't human? When I noticed something off about my wife's behaviour, I assumed I'd forgotten something she said. I was terrible at keeping the complicated social schedule straight when not actively staring at the calendar on our kitchen counter. Maybe I'd neglected to grab something she asked me to pick up, because unless she texted specifically what it was, I was bound to miss an item on the list. Not that my forgetfulness was uncommon, but this staple of our marriage had led me to become quite adept at apologising with the same playful charm that made her fall in love with me in the first place. Except this time, the flowers went unnoticed on the counter, a shoulder up after a late shift ended unceremoniously, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something more serious was wrong. We had an excellent track record of properly talking when something seriously bothered either of us, with arguments reduced to identifying a miscommunication and how to avoid it in the future. I tried gently prodding in different avenues of conversation over dinner to get to the root of the problem, but my wife kept insisting that nothing was wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling, and after a restless night I was a bit of a mess at work the next morning. After returning home in my sleep-deprived state, I practically begged to get into a fight to clear the air between us. Within minutes of walking in the door, I made the kind of snide remark I always immediately regret, but occasionally I can't keep from slipping out. Instead of starting a shouting match with the tension in the air, It was brushed over without a second glance as my wife asked if I'd stopped by the store to grab the rope and a larger set of shears that she'd requested for a new garden project. A heavy knot settled in my stomach as my unease grew, because I knew between my childish comments and forgotten hardware run that she should have been furious. I gave up and turned to head back to the direction of the store, but saw her standing from the living room window as I backed out the driveway. My feelings of unease continued to compound, and as I checked the mirrors and rubbed my bloodshot eyes, something had just hit me. I hadn't seen my wife blink for almost 2 days. She's always watching. Have you ever had a stalker? If you said yes, you know how scary that is. Even if the stalker isn't much of a threat to you physically, just knowing that you're being watched, wondering if someone's going to creep out the closet, leaves you feeling vulnerable and afraid. You can call the police, sure, get a restraining order if you want. You could even move house, change your phone number. For more desperate measures, you can turn to violence, maybe even kill them if it comes to it. The point is, you have options. But what do you do when your stalker isn't alive? Calling the police won't help. You can't arrest what you can't see. Same is true for any violence against it. So what you do? In my case, I've had my ghostly stalker since I was about 9. I won't go into all the times she's terrified me to death, or the times that I've begged my parents to make her go away. Believe me, it was a hard few years of doctors, medication and bedwetting before I learned that pretending she wasn't there was probably the best course. The nights were worse. I was alone with her, in the dark. My nightlight never seemed bright enough. I tried not to look at her. Her presence was so consuming that it just made focusing on anything else impossible. So I'd watch her standing across my room, her long, stringy hair draped over her shoulders, her pale skin seeming to glow in the darkness. The ghost, as I've taken to calling her, has never harmed me or spoke to me. She only ever just stood there, her black eyes focusing on me with such intensity, and her pale fingers curled as if ready to sink those sharpened fingernails into my flesh. Her stare never wavers. She never blinks. I'm all she sees, or so I thought. Last night I awoke from a nightmare that left me drenched in sweat. I immediately saw her staring at me, but even in the darkness, I knew something was different. Her face, which had always seemed to be void of any emotion, was twisted in rage. Her lips were pulled back so I could see almost every single tooth. Her body looked tense, as if she was ready to pounce. I wanted to run, but something stopped me. Something thin and grey with skin dry and cracked shuffled from under my bed. Its hideous face was gaping up at me, all smiles and teeth. It uncoiled its long fingers reaching for me, but before it could grab me, my ghost stalker lunged. She was on the thing under my bed in a flash. I squeezed my eyes shut, but it didn't stop the sounds. She was still there this morning, her fingernails caked with dry blood, that same intensity in her eyes, and she's still there now, watching and waiting, never looking away, her stare never wavering, and I pray that it never does. The broken pizza. My old man was a pizza guy, best pizza guy there was. In the old country, my granddad, Angelo, had found out the secret to making the best pizza, and he'd written it in blood. Pops carried a little note with him everywhere he went. I still remember looking at the flaky brown scribbles on that yellow paper. I asked my Pops what language it was in, since it wasn't written in Italian, but he shook his head and told me that the pizza guy never asks any questions. I was 13 years old when my old man first put some pizza dough in my hand. By the end of that year, I had marinara in my veins. The fire was in me, and my pop took notice. One night after we closed up shop, he gave me a forceful pat on the back and gave me a Coke. "You've got the family fire in you, son," he smiled. He said I was going to be the best pizza guy the family had ever seen, and I'd worked so hard I deserved to take the day off and go to school. The next day, a Monday, I'll never forget. While I was at school, my father and all my brothers died in a pizza oven fire. I still remember running to the restaurant, embers crackling beneath my feet, searching for my old man amongst the smouldering timber. I thought I heard him somewhere beneath the rubble. As I dug deeper and deeper into the scorching debris with my rapidly blistering hands, I found his fist jutting upwards. He must have known I was there, because his hand opened, and I caught sight of my grandpop's old note. But before I could reach out and grab it, something from below shook the ground. I sprang to my feet as my old man's hand got sucked below ground. still holding the note, leaving me alone in our restaurant. The broken pizza. Homeschooled. I remember what school was like before I was homeschooled. I remember how my mummy would never let me stay home from school. She always made me wake up so early. I remember how the kids were mean to me sometimes, like when Reagan said my backpack was stupid. I remember how I had to eat the stinky food the lunch ladies gave me, how my friend Avy's mummy always packed them yummy snacks. I remember how much I hated PE. They always picked me last. I remember how my teacher, Miss Hawthorne, was my best friend. She would always let me play inside when the kids were mean to me on the playground. She would give me goldfish crackers and cookies when the lunch lady's food was gross. She would give me big hugs and tell me she wishes she had a kid just like me. I remember what school was like before I was homeschooled. Miss Hawthorne keeps telling me that homeschooling is so much fun, but I miss my mummy and my friends. I wonder what the rest of the class is doing since Miss Hawthorne took me away to homeschool. My special day. Today is my day. I wake up with the slight trembles running through my legs, taking care not to stumble. I get up from my bed and walk over to the mirror. I pull out my beauty satchel and lay out the different hairbrushes, one for detangling, one for brushing, a third for shine, handcrafted by my father for my sisters and I to use. It's no joke when you've got a head of hair like mine, each strand carried from day of birth, never cut, trimmed, or altered. I start with the detangler. Today is my day. The excitement I feel is numbing. I have known this day would come from the moment I could speak, but it never felt quite real. I don't know why the trembles have turned to shakes. Who knew noble bliss could have such a physical toll on my body? My face is pale and sickly, so I apply the red powder gifted to me the night before. The artificial colour is not as beautiful as my natural blush, and I'm saddened to think I won't look my best today. Today is my day. I murmur the songs of my people under my breath as I stroke the old doll in my lap. I think of my last sister holding the same toy on her day, and the sister before her. I just know on their days they had seemed a lot more mature than I feel. Silent tears fall on the fabric of the wooden doll's dress, and I start to gasp for air. The honour is too great. Like them, I have been chosen. Today is my day. The elders come in, followed by men in robes who tie my wrists and ankles, and I am led out to the main congregation area. The people of my village cheer and rejoice, falling to their knees as they praise the leader as he speaks. Today is Abayomi's 10th birthday. It is her special day, he announces as the robed men lift me and place me on the concrete slab at the centre of the ceremony. Today she gifts us the blood from her body to help our community heal from the curses placed upon us, to help rid us of this sickness and this evil inflicted on our people. Bless thee, Abayomi. Bless thee, Abayomi, my people chant back. I'm not supposed to, but I crane my neck to sneak one last peek. My mother is in the front row, head bent low to the ground in prayer. She lifts her gaze for an instant, and I see the red veins of happiness stain her eyes. I close my own eyes and embrace the blackness before me. Even though I cry through my closed lids, I am still so happy. Today is my special day. Gravity. Gravity can be unforgiving. It doesn't give a damn if you're 2 feet above ground or 200 feet. It will bring you down either way. It also doesn't give a damn if there's something heavy or light above you. It will bring that thing crashing down upon your head. Gravity didn't give a damn about Kelly either. When Kelly jumped from the aeroplane and her parachute didn't open, gravity didn't give a damn that Kelly had a family. It didn't give a damn she had friends. And it certainly didn't give a damn that Kelly didn't want to die. Gravity just wanted Kelly to come down to the surface as fast as possible, even if her parachute hadn't opened. We don't go into the basements at night, so I'll try to keep this relatively short. My wife and I sold our first house to capitalise on the housing market on the use of the windfall to pay off our student loans and our car, etc. After a year at renting at an insanely high price per month, we decided we wanted to buy again. We found an old house in the old part of town. When I say old, I mean old. This house was built in like 1883, which makes it 140 years old next year. Single story, 3 bedroom, 1 bathroom. We were the only bid on the house, which considering the market right now, was very hard to believe. But regardless, the house was ours, and my wife, myself and our daughter moved in. The house was covered in crosses all over the main level. Not being Christian, we removed them all. At first it just was what it was. An old house comes with old problems, but it was nothing we couldn't handle. It wasn't until we found the door to the basement that everything changed. The basement was hand dug out with poured cement and carpeting dividing the 2 sections separated by a wall and a door. The first section was carpeted and what I call presentation ready. It's the area you'd show a company. From the first area you could access the hydro panel and have room for storage. The area beyond the door was about as different as you could get. Bare concrete floor, strange writing on the walls, false wall panels, etc. If I'd had the choice, I'd stay out there entirely, but it's how you get to the water heater and the furnace, so I went down there quite regularly. While I went downstairs one day, working, it was the first part of the basement I heard a strange noise from. Thinking it was the furnace, I went to check it out. Entering the second area, I walked past these strange writings on the walls to the furnace when I noticed a strange small door built into the wall. The only thing we knew about the previous owners was that the family had owned the house for over 100 years and were known in the neighbourhood as being very strange and kept entirely to themselves. Opening the door, I found a small stone statue of a tall figure wearing tattered robes, a hood covering his face, and horrific tentacles coming from under. The noise happened again, and I dropped the statue out of shock. It broke on the floor. Inside the opening was a bunch of old yellow papers and books. I didn't want to touch anything else, so I left and I went upstairs. The night after the sunset, we heard rumbling in the basement and we swore we heard something growling. The next morning, I went downstairs and found the walls covered in a symbol I didn't recognise, and I grew afraid. We hired someone to come out and take a look. The hired hand went downstairs and never came back. I don't know how to explain it. The partition door closed behind him, locked, and the noise came again. And when he started screaming, I pried the door open, but he was gone and the statue was back in place and whole again. We don't know if it was the removal of the crosses that brought them back into our world. We've become devoted servants because we have no choice now, to keep our family safe. I send offerings down to the beast or whatever it is, just so it leaves us alone. I've taken to displaying the statue upstairs and I've read the books. I know what the sign is, and I know what the statue is, but I can't write it here. You can come over and I'll be happy to tell you. It'll have to be at night time though, when the stars are right, and the Carcosa calls, and you can see the basement for yourself. But first, I'm curious. Have you seen the yellow sign? A small cheese pizza with Coke, please, came the order from the lady at the register. And please be quick. After her order, there was only one customer left. Understandable since it was pretty late. A man with a dark buzz coat and a decent stubble. He walks over to the register and eyes me carefully. "Hey," he says, in what he probably thinks is a seductive way, but I answer sternly. "May I take your order, sir?" "Of course you can," he laughs, showing all his golden teeth. He orders and sits down by himself on a table. I serve him his pizza and I'm about to leave when he grabs me by the wrist. "Let go," I say in a tone I'd usually use with a dog. He shakes his head. "Keep me company." "No, I have to work," I reply. I search around the restaurant but see nobody but us. The man looks around the restaurant himself and clicks his tongue. "There's nobody here. Who you gonna serve?" I knew he made sense, of course, but I snatched away my arm. "I still have work to do," I bark. He laughs and then takes a slice of pizza. "You want?" I want to say no thanks, but instead I don't say anything. I silently make my way towards the kitchen where the cook was. "That motherfucker," I say to her, nodding at the man through the window. "A creep. Hope he leaves soon." But he doesn't leave. He sits there, smacking down his pizza slowly. Suddenly, he takes out a pack of cigarettes and puffs one. I knew what he was playing at. I approach him and say quietly, "Sir, it's strictly prohibited to smoke in here. I'll have to ask you to leave." He says nothing. His eyes are dark and suddenly he grabs my arm again, harder this time, and starts dragging me away. I scream, but I know that cook couldn't hear me because she keeps her headphones on full volume, The man drags me into the parking lot. He approaches a particular grubby old Volvo and opens the door. Get in there. No, I wince in pain as he squishes my arm tighter. I said, get in there. I have no choice but to climb into the old car. The back seat smells gross and is covered in food and used tissues. The man sat at the driver's seat at the front. So, honey, he says in a soothing voice, let's teach you some manners. You bastard, I spit, wiping my mouth. I'll call the police. Oh, my sweet, you won't have a chance. He grins as he pulls out my phone and waves it in the air. My eyes feel like they're about to pop out of my skull. I pat down my pockets, obviously they're empty. Bitch! I scream. But there's nobody outside except an old minivan parked across from this guy's. My chest squeezes tighter and tighter, and there's no air. Oh gosh, I can't breathe. The minivan's headlights suddenly blare. My chest feels a little lighter. I keep screaming and a man climbs out the minivan. He's tall with a hat on. He has a nice dark suit and a bag in his hand. The man sees him too, and his face pales. He tries to peel out of the lot, but the other guy waves his hand and yells, "Stop right there!" And he does, because he has no choice, or he'll run this guy over. When the other guy approaches, he looks a lot younger than I thought, maybe early 20s. He stares at the both of us with icy blue eyes and knocks on the window. The old man rolls it down and growls, "What you want?" The guy, who looks like a businessman from a fine company, ignores him and looks at me. "You okay, miss?" I shake my head frantically. No, this man, he..." The guy looks back at the man. "Care to explain?" I was just... Can't you mind your own business?" He tries to roll the window back down, but the other guy roars, "I'll call the police if you don't stop right now. You hear me?" "Fuck," the old man yells. "What do you want from me?" Again, the younger guy ignores him and says to me, "Maybe you should call a friend to come pick you up." But my phone's there, right on the lap of the older guy. I point to the businessman notices it and snatches it from him and gives it to me. I smile at him, and I mouth a "thank you" while I call my friend. She doesn't pick up. I call somebody else. She doesn't pick up either. "Shit," I say under my breath, and the businessman frowns. The older guy is just staring at him with fury in his eyes. "What's wrong?" asks the younger guy, still staring at me with those eyes. My friend isn't picking up. "Call a taxi, maybe?" I want to, but I just can't. I just can't after this incident with this old guy. What if the cab driver kidnaps me too? I shake my head. The older guy spits at me. "Get the fuck out of my car." I almost laugh at this because he was the one who was trying to kidnap me a moment ago. I obey and I step out of the car. He peels out the lot and yells over his shoulder, "Fuck you!" The businessman shakes his head. "I'm so glad that I saw you." "Yeah," I breathe, trying to call my friend again. "Thank you so much." I look back at the restaurant hoping Cook's still there, but everything's closed and the lights are off. I sigh. "Maybe you need a ride home?" the guy asks slowly when I look at him. He puts his hands up. "Sorry, you don't have to. I'm not trying to make you take it to my house or anything like that." I try my friend once again and give up. I look at the man, and his smooth skin, his icy blue eyes and his hat. He looks a little feminine, but a businessman. He's like that uncle that everybody seems to love. "Okay," I say. He smiles and we start walking to his minivan. The cold air blows in my face and my legs are still shaking from what happened. "I'm Edward, by the way," he says, and I'm not surprised. He does look like an Edward, but you can call me Ed for short. "Thanks, Ed," I say slowly. "I'm Penny." I stop right there in the road. My heart hammers into my chest and I feel a little bit queasy as another thought hits me. Can I really trust this man to take me home? How can I be sure that his intentions are pure? He must have read my mind because he looks at the floor and exhales. "If you don't feel comfortable going with me, I don't mind. I really don't care, to be honest. I just want you to be safe and take you to the safety of your home. You don't have to come with me if you don't want to." I don't reply. "Look," he says, his eyes darting around, searching my face. "I mean no harm. You don't have to come with me. You can stay with somebody on a call maybe, all the way home. I really don't mind, but I could just drive away right now. Leave you right here in this empty parking lot at midnight on a Wednesday. Everybody's asleep. Nobody's here. Do you want to stay on your own?" This seemed kind of like threatening to me, but I sigh as I think it over. I'm a huge overthinker, and right now isn't the best time to eliminate all my best hopes. "It's alright," I mutter. I'll come with you." A warm smile tugs across the man's lips and we begin walking back to his minivan. I climb into the back, call my friend once again, but none of them pick up. I exhale in frustration. The guy tuts. "Not picking up, are they?" he says, one flick of the finger. He's locked all the doors. My heart jumps into my chest and it's hard to breathe again. I made sure of that. I felt the colour drain from my face. What the fuck? You're a fool. He gives a heartless laugh, but his icy eyes are still staring in front of me at the front mirror. Can't go around trusting everybody. My grip on my phone tightens as I dial 911. He sees me and laughs. It rings, but nobody answers. Everything seems to turn dark for a second. The police won't be any help, he says once again. They won't even pick up. And I made sure your phone battery was low when I rescued you from that other guy too. He continues, even if they do pick up, what will they do, huh? They'll waste time to come here, and the officer will ask you what happened. You'll tell him, I was trying to kidnap you. Will he believe you though, with my shiny look? My voice shakes as I say quietly, they might. Yeah, he waves his hand dismissively, still staring at me. They might. But think this over carefully, girl. Will they believe a 17-year-old working girl at a restaurant, or a 23-year-old shiny, innocent, perfect-looking businessman? My chest begins to squeeze in on itself as suddenly my phone freezes and then dies. My throat closes in and tears prickle in my eyes. What do you want from me? I whisper, looking around. No other cars, no other people. The restaurant's closed. I don't want anything from you, the man says. I just need you. You'll be worth a lot. They usually like them blonde and pretty. You'll be like a meal to them. With that, he laughs and the car lurches forward. For one last time, he looks back at me with those clear blue eyes and whispers, the thing is, if you'd have just gone with the other guy earlier, you probably would have been a lot safer. Fresh chips and oil. We were out of fresh oil, and my dad asked me to go quickly down, since it was a rush hour. He leaned forward and whispered in my ear, if the torch fails, throw a bottle of oil. He said nothing after that and simply pulled a flashlight out of his pocket and put it in my hands along with the key. My family consists of my sister and my father. My mother disappeared a year ago from the crypt. My sister barely comes out of her room, and my dad's not a very cheerful, happy man. As if his mind was washed clean with discomfort, anger and dread, I had been panic eating as a result to try and cope. My father is a farmer who likes to sell fresh chips and oil to the locals. They adore him and his products. While he makes the chips in front of the customers above ground, he keeps the machinery in an old crypt. The underground crypt belonging to a church that was shut down due to a string of murders, and the church was subsequently demolished. After a minute of thinking in my head, I made it to the front. The hairs on my body stood up as I gulped. I took a step back and got nauseous. It felt like an oppressive force was trying to swallow me whole. I took a deep breath and clenched the key I had to the crypt hard. I bit my lip and opened the door. The stench of rot, blood, dust and other foul smells hit me in the face like a gust of wind. I cupped my hands over my mouth as my cheeks puffed out. Once I calmed down, I made my slow descent. I shined the area with the flashlight my father had given me before. The very protection I had was faint and overcome by the darkness. I would only be able to see a few feet away, not even. I looked out for cobwebs and spiders, yet I found none, not even an ant or a bug. I felt my hand against the damp, cold stone walls of the crypt. At the bottom of the stairs, I slowly scanned the area and peeked around the corners. It was cold and lifeless. I walked through the series of halls, the glowing torch lighting my way to the main hub. I heard scratching from many areas. I stopped silently, not uttering a word. I gripped my flashlight and slowly took steps down from the gloomy corridor. I made it inside to the main lobby area. It was massive and open. There were around 50 or more pillars dotted around the room, but it was dark, so dark. The only relief I had was the torches lining each pillar. Before I could walk over the machinery, on the left I checked the darkness. On the ground was a pile of glass shards and a broken torch. My body shook lightly as I tried to keep myself together. I ran and grabbed a sack of fresh oil bottles. The clacking inside me made me even more tense as my flight response kicked in. Before I could turn, I heard quick stepping. The slapping of hands and feet echoed through the entire crypt. The pillars were slashed and scraped. Stone bits fell to the ground with a pitter-patter. I turned to my left in front of the machines and I kept the torch close to me. I was paralysed. I realised that I wasn't alone. I stared at the darkness for a couple of minutes as I dragged the sack slowly to the exit. One of the bags on the right side of the machinery, cloaked in shadow, was taken in an instant. The clunking and smashing of glass made me scream. I stood there in shock with my hands up. I heard a sickening rip, and then quiet. Nothing. I heard nothing. I shined a light in every direction. I held it with one hand. I looked more and more excessively. My mind conjured every possible scenario where something could come and get me. Maybe from behind me. Maybe from the pillar. But then it happened. I heard a crash and the torch at the far right went out. Then another. Then another. It kept going until I could see two piercing white orbs inside the darkness, little dots amongst the massive shadow that consumed me in the room. I tipped and tapped in the darkness. I held the torch in my hand and swung it. I heard a light whimper, followed by the sound of crawling backwards. I started to run out of there. A multitude of glass bottles came out of the darkness and hit the doorway, shattering. Thousands of jagged, glimmering shards rained down on me. I shielded my eyes with my only open hand and I turned back. The white eyes were close. The eyes rose until I had to lean my head back to look upwards, until the ceiling shook, releasing some dirt and dust from the cracks in the ceiling. My eyes shook rapidly as if I was sleeping, the foggy shine of the little stars glaring on me from within the dark. It watched my every move. I felt a gust of wind. All the torches were out, including the one in my hand. I paused in disbelief and blew on it, hoping it would start again, but to no avail. I heard a voice from the darkness. "Hutchard! Hutchard! Come here, boy!" It boomed and echoed, causing me to cover my ears. I heard jingling down the hall. Hutchard came to me and started licking me happily. I felt relieved and got up. Hutchard growled at the growing eyes. It didn't even matter what it looked like. My dog, Hutchard, was brave as could be. But it was just for a moment, I swear. It was just one split second. A massive pale hand with pointed fingers grabbed Hutchard and pulled him into the darkness. The screams and whimpers of my dog were soon replaced with crunching. The eyes glowing with the darkness still remained, the silence being broken by a sloshy dripping that made my blood curdle. My body sweated as the goosebumps arrived on my skin. I weakly shined my flashlight at the area, and my heart started pounding. I wanted to puke and cry. It was heart-wrenching. Hutchard's head and collar were lying on the crypt's cold floor in a puddle of red. I heard a ghostly snarl from inside the darkness which echoed throughout the crypt. I reached into the bag quickly and took out my bottle of fresh olive oil, the rest clacking inside. I reached my arm back like a pitcher and chucked it at the eyes. I ditched the bag and bolted towards the exit hall. My eyes were wide, and I didn't even have time to scream. The blood coursing through my veins went hot, with the sporadic pumping, the adrenaline fueling my flight. I expected to hear a smash, rather than an echo of spilling and delighted coos thrashing my eardrums. My mother's voice echoed throughout the halls behind me. I stopped immediately. "Bill! Bill! Where are you, Bill? Please don't leave me down here." I clenched my shirt and ran away. I heard it scream in her voice, something I could never forget. "Bill! Come back!" Once I got to the steps, I skipped every other until I collapsed on the grass and shut the crypt's door. I took my time to catch my breath. My lungs expanded and pounded as I greedily gulped air. The sweat poured down my back as my eyes rapidly blinked. I ran back to the stands and fell into my dad's arms, crying excessively. All I remember saying in the panicked state was, "It got Hutchard. There's something down there, Dad." My dad grabbed my shoulders and said, "Close down the shop. I'm going to get the shotgun." My dad ran inside as quickly as he ran outside with the family shotgun. I saw him make his way down to the crypt and go downstairs. It took everything I had to concentrate on cleaning up the area. Every minute I looked back and again, yet he didn't return. I feared for the worst and dialed my grandparents. After 30 minutes they came to pick me up and my sister. I lied to them. I told them that Dad said we would go and see them. When we were there I cried for hours. They asked me what was up, but I said it was because of a breakup. Another lie. I heard knocking at the door and I went to go and get it. It was my dad. He was all bandaged up and one of his eyes was covered with a patch. In his right hand he clutched Hutchard's bloody collar. In his left was his cell phone. I was seduced by a siren. A modern day siren, a beautiful creature of the deep. A few years ago I had hopes, dreams, and the world was my oyster, but for some reason I decided to look into a puddle. A small puddle, a glistening pothole that was positioned neatly in the corner of an alleyway. A beautiful flower grew from its cracks, a strange contrast to its solemn environment. I went down to pick it up. As I stepped away and examined its curves, a woman flooded into my life. It started with a hello, and then a hug, then a kiss, then an embrace, and then it. She made me feel things I'd never felt before. Pure ecstasy, sexual bliss, a lustful dream straight from the depths of heaven. I'd been around the block, but this was a whole nother league. Something inhuman. It couldn't have been real. I left with my explosions of joy. My mind was overwhelmed with emotions. How could someone like this exist? It's like she had known my sexual need her entire life, and she was waiting for this moment to just emerge. But, but somehow it felt tainted by a subtle bad feeling that I playfully just tucked away. I soon ran back, and she was waiting. For the next couple of weeks, she rewired my brain. I became addicted to her, and my lust for her. I started to put my goals aside, and she became my priority. It felt too good to walk away from. My goals could wait after all. I could leave at any time. And then one day, I saw the side of her I didn't want to see. I walked by that water-filled pothole I'd crossed so many weeks ago, but it had dried up. What was left was a dark, never-ending hole. I looked inside, and what I saw was a dark sea of men. Those men who had fallen, those who had given in to her kisses, her embrace, her sickly love, and I saw how she fed off of them, like an animal. I looked away and I ran home. I tried not to think about it. That couldn't have been what I think it was. Surely she would not do the same to me. I was different. I had the control. But she wouldn't leave my mind. I told myself to be cautious. I told myself to proceed slowly, but something had already taken control. Like a puppeteer waking a mouth, the question came out of my mouth uncontrollably. Commit to me? She looked deep into my eyes as if I had been waiting for this moment. She then ruffled my hair, ran a finger down my neck, smiled and told me yes. I swear I saw a spark of something sinister cross her eyes before she looked away, but I ignored it. I rejoiced in my newfound passion. She was mine, and I was hers. We were hooked, together. As months went by, I fell deeper into her trance. Little by little, her shiny scales began to shed, like a feather that had been splattered with mud. She was always right, and I was always wrong. I was always to blame, and she was always the victim. She walked all over me, yet rewarded me with pure ecstasy when I agreed. I didn't mind, because it was too good. Those soft hands, pulsating on me. She would ride me into the early hours, ever so softly. Nothing in my life had ever compared. She was a goddess in the bedroom, to be honest. I slowly came to realize she was training me like an animal. My treat was her warm embrace. It became my nirvana, my bliss, my world, and all I had to do to get it was listen. Year by year her power grew stronger. She became colder, more domineering, but this was no surprise to me. Deep down, I knew what she was, a creature from that dark hole, but I didn't care. Suddenly, I pushed away. I swam up, gasping for air. I climbed out and looked into a mirror. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. I was covered in hair oil and crusty grime. I couldn't flake it off. I had lost my dreams, my purpose, and my goals. What had I become? I'd become a part of her, but I was too scared to look away. She whispered in my ear that it could all be gone in a flash. She had a list of other men waiting for her. I crawled back in, hopeless. Envy rained on me every single day as I saw other men walk by, oblivious to the hole I had fallen into. She could take any one of them, but no one else could have her. She was mine, so I gave her everything. And I lost myself. Then one day, on a full moon, I saw a light. I don't know how it reached me, but it seeped in. It was foggy, blurry, some kind of omen. It told me that I needed to leave, now, before the feeling wore off. It was the hardest thing I ever did, but I decided to listen. I climbed out of that damned hole, and I ran. She followed me, like a fish out of water. I looked back, and I saw her in her truest form, an aged siren, a hellish creature from the deep, with no purpose but to feed. I ran as far as I could. She began to fade in the distance, and now I scraped that crusty grime off my soul. Little by little, day by day, I feel like I'm emerging from a sick dream. A month later, I saw a new victim fall into that hole, and I couldn't help but feel sorrow. But there was nothing I could do. It was time to look inward. What happened to me? How did I fall so deeply into that place of lust? I realized it was because of fear. My fear of pursuing my dreams. My fear of disappointing. My fear of failure. I now have no choice but to pursue that dream, relentlessly and fearlessly, because the alternative is back in that hole, watching me and waiting for me. Every night my girlfriend wakes up to tell me the exact same joke. Before I start, I feel like I should get something very clear. I absolutely love Ellen. We've been living together for about 3 years now, but have known each other for our whole lives. In fact, we were childhood friends. I know this might sound like a fairy tale to some people, but it truly felt like we were always destined to be together. Even after graduation, when we started dating other people, it only felt truly right when we were with each other. So I don't know what took me so long to ask her out, but I'm really glad that I did. We have the exact same taste in music, movies and even food. We laugh at the same dumb jokes and know exactly how to comfort each other in times of need. She's the kindest, most gentle and loving girl I've ever met. We even talk about our plans for marriage someday, and how we would like to have kids of our own maybe. That's why it hurts so much, and how it all went terribly wrong in just 4 nights. I would also like to preface that Ellen doesn't have much time for family other than me, and some very distant aunts that she never met and doesn't really know their names. I was born in a big family, with 4 siblings and plenty of cousins that were always visiting, and even helping out when we got in trouble. Ellen has none of that. She doesn't have any siblings, and her father was an alcoholic, abusive freak that died when she was young. Her mother was a very kind and inspiring woman. She took care of the family by herself for many years, and almost a second mother to myself too. So when she passed away last year, it hurt us both for a long time. But Ellen stayed strong. She's not the type to let her feelings easily surface, so you've got to be a lot more perceptive to get what she truly feels. I used to be proud of myself that I'm capable of that. I felt like I knew her better than I knew myself at times. That's why this is all so strange and, frankly, terrifying. We were sleeping in bed and I was dreaming. I don't really remember what it was about, to be honest, but for some reason, I'm sure of it, until I heard her voice very close to my ear. Knock, 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 knock. She was caressing my hair gently, while sitting in bed and looking below at me. I slowly opened my eyes, groggy from sleep. Hey, what is it, baby? She kept looking at me, fixated, and repeated, knock, 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 knock. I glanced at the digital clock on top of the dresser at 3:27 a.m. I had work in a few hours. What is it, Ellen? She paused. Please answer the joke, dear. Knock, knock. Knock, knock. Fine. I accepted, mostly because I was expecting some kind of surprise. Ella wasn't the type to do what she was doing for no reason. Who's there? Her smile opened up and she answered, Not me, so don't answer the door. I kept looking at her, dumbfounded. What was that supposed to mean? Is that it? Is that the joke? Yeah, she said, laying in the couch and covering herself with a blanket. Thank you for answering. Weirdo, I answered and closed my eyes. Next morning, things went as usual. I only remembered the strange conversation while I was alone in the bathroom brushing my teeth. I wasn't even sure if it truly happened or if it was just some sort of weird dream. So we had our breakfast together, and she was acting normal, reading something aloud from a fashion magazine. Frankly, I wasn't paying much attention, to be honest, so I took the opportunity to ask about last night. Initially, she didn't seem to know what I was talking about. Then her eyes fixated on me and the same smile from last night crossed her face briefly. And I knew it wasn't just a dream. She told me it wasn't anything of importance and stopped paying attention when I asked more inquisitively. And even though I shouldn't, I gave up. I had work and other matters to attend to, and just brushed off the weird event, thinking it would never happen again. But the following night, I woke up to a voice. Knock, knock. A pause. Knock. What is it now? I said. Ellen, what are you doing? Knock, 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 she repeated. This time, she wasn't even touching me, just sitting in our bed, looking at me with the same smile, but her eyes seemed larger, and she blinked in longer intervals. I looked at the clock. Again, 3:27 a.m. Ellen, come on. What is it? I've got work in a few hours. Can't even have the luxury of waking up in the middle of the night without knock-knock jokes. Knock, knock, knock. This is getting creepy, you know. I'm not sure if this is some kind of gag you've been doing, but I don't like it. Answer it. Knock, knock, knock. I sighed, but also let out a small laugh. It was creepy, of course, but she was also my Ellen, so it didn't bother me as much as it should. Fine. Who the fuck's there? I answered in a playful tone. Not me, so don't answer the door. For some reason, I felt a chill down my spine. It was the same answer as before, and I still didn't get what the joke was, but the way she said it, with a strange monotone voice contrasting well with her smile, and the fact that I had no idea what she meant by that. What does that mean? I asked. I really don't get it. She just smiled and went back to sleep. I felt a throb in my heart, but did the same. The next day we talked again about what was happening. She was very evasive with my questions, and I barely got her to say anything. It was almost as if she couldn't talk about it, which was very strange considering we talk about pretty much everything. I told her I needed to be well rested for work, something she should understand well, and wasn't liking her little gag every single night. She just nodded and decided not to press further, as I didn't want to hurt her feelings and had work to attend to. When I got back home, we had dinner, watched a movie, and eventually went to bed. Knock knock. I opened my eyes faster this time round. In fact, I barely got any sleep. I just knew she was going to do it again and kept thinking about it the entire time. Glanced at the clock. 3:27 a.m. Knock knock. I thought about just ignoring her, just pretending I was asleep and she wouldn't wake me up. So I closed my eyes slowly, hoping that she hadn't seen me open them in the first place, and I stayed quiet. Knock knock. She continued. She didn't stop. I regulated my breathing, but she kept going. Knock knock. I'm not answering your fucking joke, Ellen. Stop it. Knock knock. I ignored, but she kept going. She'd never been this insistent with anything before. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting on my nerves, and frankly, I felt scared. Why was Ellen doing this? Why every night at the same time, down to the minute? Why wouldn't she let me sleep until I answered her? Knock knock. I got up in a sudden movement. God damn it, Ellen! I was ready for a discussion, but when I finally glanced at her, it was as if the strength was drained from me. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't blinking, just staring right at me, fixated like an animal, and her mouth was moving, slowly. She didn't stop. Knock knock. I didn't know how to react or what expression I had when I saw her, but my heart skipped a beat. It was terrifying, as if her gaze froze me in place. 1,000-yard stare. Knock knock. Who's there? I asked, feeling as if it was the only way out of this nightmare. Not me, so don't answer the door, she said, weakly. Ellen closed her eyes and lay down. I had kept staring at her for a while until she fell into what seemed to be a deep sleep. I got up and left. I walked downstairs and sat down at the couch in the living room, staring at the night sky outside and absorbing the quiet of the neighbourhood. My heart was beating fast and it didn't slow down. I was just too scared to sleep in the same room as my girlfriend, all because of a fucking knock-knock joke. But it was unnatural. I thought about calling somebody. I thought about it all being some kind of deep sleep-related issue, such as sleepwalking or something. It didn't really make any sense. I felt so tired and decided that early in the morning I would call an old friend who's a psychologist and get the opinion of a professional. Something was wrong with Ellen. I stayed on the couch as the day rose, and once Ellen woke up, she was acting normal again. Even asked me why I wasn't in bed. I didn't answer, in fact. I didn't even speak to her. I just simply left for work. She seemed very upset, but I wouldn't do anything about it. Once I got to work, I called my friends, and I told them everything that's been happening in as much detail as I'm describing right now. He didn't seem as worried as I figured, but we agreed on making an appointment for next week. Now I just needed to convince Ellen to come with me. I received plenty of text messages from her. She seemed very worried, sad and even confused. She apologised a lot, and it broke my heart a little. I felt bad. I shouldn't have, but I answered her, and made her promise that it wouldn't happen again. I also told her about the appointment, and she seemed reluctant but agreed to go with me, so we made up. This was Ellen after all, the girl I'd known since I was 6 years old, the woman I loved, and that had taken care of me for years, and as much as its strange behaviour creeped me out, she wasn't doing anything particularly frightening or even dangerous. So for a brief while, I convinced myself I should just give her another chance. When I returned home from work, we stayed together. She even prepared my favourite meal. Ellen was acting as gentle and caring as I had always remembered, and I slept with her in our bedroom even though I was still a bit reluctant. Knock. I couldn't believe it. She promised me she wouldn't. Knock. I looked at the clock. 3:27. Always. Knock. I was laying on my stomach and I couldn't see her face. In fact, I didn't even bother to look at her. I was feeling more sad than scared at this point. Sad that she'd broken her word. Knock. Who's there? I answered, determined to just go back to sleep. Not me, so don't answer the door. I stayed quiet and closed my eyes. I just hoped that I would be able to handle it until the appointment next week. To my surprise, I was actually able to sleep, probably because I hadn't been able to rest since last night. The following morning, I went back to not saying anything to Ellen. I only limited on my responses. I was expecting her to act the same as yesterday, trying to apologise, but she didn't. Mostly, she didn't say anything, almost as if she'd accepted it. She also looked tired, or at least weak. I went to work, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Didn't receive any messages either. Once I got back, we had the most silent dinner I'd ever had in my life. She barely ate anything. I decided to let her have the bedroom and sleep on the couch. I wasn't sure if I would stop her, but I held on to the hope that she wouldn't go downstairs only to tell me the same knock-knock joke again. I covered myself with a blanket, shaked off that uneasy feeling and tried to sleep. I had a deep sleep without any dreams. I felt like I was lost in the darkness, and then I heard breathing. Opened my eyes to see Ellen standing above me, looking at me with big fixated eyes and dilated pupils that didn't seem to belong in such a completely neutral expression, just watching me sleep. I almost screamed in terror, jumping off the couch, and her eyes followed me as I stumbled through the dark room, creating distance between us. For a moment I was able to glance at the clock above the table. 3:27 a.m. "Ellen, what are you doing?" I asked desperately, but she didn't move. In fact, she didn't say anything. She just stared at me as if I was made of glass and she could see right through me. Then I heard a knock on the front door. Instinctively, I looked in that direction. It was followed by another knock, and another. Someone almost pounding at the door. I glanced back at Ellen and she was still staring at me slowly. I got closer to the door and she didn't even move. The pounding continued. "Who's there?" I screamed. It stopped and I heard a voice. "John? John, can you hear me? Open the door, please. John, please open the door." I froze in my place. The voice kept calling, but I couldn't believe it. It was Ellen's voice, coming from the other side of the door, but it couldn't be. "I beg you, John, open the door. It's serious. She's not me. I swear that she's not me." Slowly, I turned my head to look at Ellen standing in front of the couch. She was looking at me, the same fixated eyes and a terrible wide grin across her face. The pounding continued. "John, open the door, please. You have to trust me." I stayed still, not knowing what to do. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up in my bedroom. The digital clock indicates it's now 4:21 a.m. Ellen isn't by my side. I'm completely alone. I'm trembling, uncontrollably, and I don't even know what's going on. I don't remember what happened after I saw her terrible grin. I don't even know if I opened the door. I tried to look for my phone, see if I could call the police, or at least someone that I know, but I left it downstairs. All I have is Ellen's laptop, and that's where I'm writing this from now, to get advice, because I can't go downstairs. The corridor is dark, very dark, almost as if the shadows are leaning into the room, and I can hear a faint scratching sound coming from below. What should I do? I didn't think demons existed until I met my mother. Throughout my entire life, I was raised Catholic. Pretty white dresses every Sunday with a rosary to match. Bible in hand at night. Prayers over the table at breakfast, lunch and dinner. I did everything to go to heaven, but there was one thing I was always looked down upon for in my church. I only had a dad. I never knew my mum. I was told she died when I was young, but when I got older, something told me that wasn't true. Why would everyone glare at me or whisper about my father and me if it was simply a death? It was always the same question when I was younger. "Daddy? Where's Mummy?" He never had an actual answer until I hit my teens. How would you tell your 5-year-old daughter her mother's dead? I know I always ask this, but please, as a birthday gift, what happened to Mum? I had asked him on my 16th birthday. He finally gave me a straight answer. She died. But he never gave me the cause. I never bothered bringing it up again. I honestly didn't want to know at the time. Years later, I realised I regret asking, but I can't ask anymore. He's gone too. After he died, I did stray from the religion I grew up in. I lost all my belief. Why believe in it now that I'm older? I threw out everything I grew up with. Until now. "Coming!" I yelled from my kitchen. Running to the front door, I swung it open, but no one was there. Damn kids. Or maybe not. I looked down to find a small box left on my doorstep. Usually I would be more cautious of what would be in a random box with no address just showing up, but I was tired. I brought it into the house and I set it on the counter. "Happy birthday, honey. Kiss, kiss." My eyebrows furrowed at the small writing on the box. It wasn't my birthday, yet there was something in me that told me to open it. Grabbing a knife, I ran it along the tape and held it together with bated breath. The sound of the cardboard ripping apart made me cringe, but I held steady. With the box I opened up. I looked inside it slowly. "I haven't seen you in years. I hope you'll let me in your life. Kiss, kiss." Inside was a large photo album filled with pictures of me as a child with my father. Photos I'd never even seen before. Birthday parties, my kindergarten graduation, dozens and dozens of photos of me with my father. But it felt off. It felt wrong to look at them. My eyes danced across the photos before I came to the realization that there was one woman in the background of every single one of these photos that I'd never seen before. Never seen in person. Never seen in pictures. I'd never set my eyes on this woman, yet she was in every single childhood picture, staring down at me with a large smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were empty. I don't know how to explain it. Her eyes were black. Not dark brown. Black. I slammed the photo album shut and tossed it back into the box. That's not real. It couldn't be. I grabbed the whole box and stuffed it in the garbage can. I don't know the woman in those pictures, and I don't want to know her either. Shaking my head hard, I ran to the bathroom to wash my face. Just before I turned the tap on, I gave myself a close look. The hair matched. The nose was similar. The full lips. No, 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 she's dead. It's impossible. Oh, honey, it's very possible. I jumped at the sudden voice. It was soft, comforting, but it felt fake. A shiver ran down my spine and I slammed the bathroom door shut. It's not real. Sliding down the white door, I let out a loud breath. I didn't know I was holding in. For some reason, I recognised that voice. It rang through my head and stuck as if I knew who it was. I slowly stood up before placing my hand on the metal door handle. I didn't want to turn it. I tried everything in me to pull myself away from doing it, but something came over me. I didn't have control over myself, and with a slow pull, I opened the door to... Nothing? No. Another box. Don't pick it up, don't pick it up, don't fucking pick it up, I screamed internally as I bent down and dug my fingernails into the cardboard. The feeling made me sick. It was as if I was an autopilot, but still conscious of every single move my body made. Unlike the first box though, this one was wet. The entire bottom was soaked with something, but I couldn't make it out there and then. I had made my way back to my bedroom and placed the box on my white sheets. Not white, no. They'd become red now. My eyes widened and I yelled, or I thought I did. I didn't really know anymore. It's a family heirloom. I hope you like it. Heart, kiss, kiss. My stomach turned as I opened the box. My hands shook terribly while I moved the perfectly placed tissue paper to reveal the seventh hand of a beautiful sapphire ring on its finger. I stumbled back, breathing heavily with eyes watering. This isn't real! I screamed as loud as I could, tears flowing freely. Sweetie, I already told you. Of course I'm real. The voice wasn't just loud, it was reverberating in my skull. I couldn't escape it. I slumped down onto the carpet, hitting my head over and over again with my fist. Don't hurt yourself, I'm just trying to help. Get out, stop! I hit hard with every demand. I brought my knees to myself, sobbing. This is a nightmare. I'm asleep. Get me out of this fucking nightmare. I saw a red liquid drop onto my carpet, staining it. My eyes travelled slightly and I saw a pair of black heels in front of me, the blood beginning to flow quicker. I didn't want to look up, but again, something inside me made my body do it. My entire body froze as soon as I peered up at the person in front of me. The ligaments of the woman's left wrist had been ripped apart and trickled blood continuously. Who are you? I whimpered, trying to see through my tears. That smile, those eyes, they're so void of empathy, of emotion, of anything. I'm your mum, sweetheart.